thinking about what they're doing, and seeing the opportunities to engineer, re-engineer, and reinvent their job. Zynga, the big game company, they've got this at the extreme edge in a hyper connected and competitive world. Mark Pincus will tell you that Zynga now evaluates their team leaders every quarter because they do probably 5 product cycles in a year of games. They can't wait till the end of the year to figure out they have a bad team leader, so they now assess them every quarter. That's at the far edge of this, but it is probably generally where this is going. So let me give you a couple examples. The first is really how I got onto this. The head of that white-collar law firm, his name's Jeff Lesk, happens to be a family friend. He's married to my wife's best friend. I actually first started thinking about this because we had dinner 2008 right in the middle of the Lehman crisis. Lehman Brothers had just melted down. And I said to Jeff, what's happened to your law firm? He said, well, business way off. I said, well, what happens in a law firm, when that happens? He said, we're firing people. I said, well, in a law firm, is it last in, first out? Well, I said, wasn't before. But here's what's going on now. Here's what's going on now. When we had all that work during the credit bubble and we handed it to our lawyers, our non-routine lawyers, and they did it in a routine, non-routine, and routine way and handed it back, lawyers who did that, a lot of them are gone now. The ones we're keeping are those who we give the work to now, and they say, Jeff, we can do this old work in a new way, or we can do new work in a new way. His interview in the book ends with him announcing that his firm has just hired, his law firm has just hired a chief innovation officer. How many law firms do you know with a chief innovation officer? But that's the nature of their market now and product cycles. Most interesting to me was the head of that green-collar firm. He's General Martin Dempsey. You may have heard his name because he's currently the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, our senior military officer. But I actually came to interview him because when we were working on the book, he was head of the U.S. Army Education Corps. But what's interesting about General Dempsey is that in 2003, he was the commander of the 1st Armored Division that took Baghdad from Saddam Hussein in the Iraq War. He is the commander who took Baghdad. In 2008, 5 years later, he found himself as head of CENTCOM, our overall military command, before he was then promoted to education and then chairman of the Joint Chiefs. In the role of commander of CENTCOM, he went to visit a far-flung base, army base, in Afghanistan out near the Hindu Kush, commanded by a U.S. Army captain. And he tells this story in the book. I sat with that captain for 2 hours, and I realized after 2 hours that that captain had access to more intelligence at the tactical and national level and could order up more firepower than I, General Martin Dempsey, could 5 years earlier when I took Baghdad from Saddam Hussein. That's how much had changed militarily in a hyper-connected world. Therefore, when he came back and took over the U.S. Army Education Corps, completely revamped the whole way we do basic training. One of the things he instituted is new recruits, in many cases, are given an iPhone. First day they arrive in boot camp. By week 3, they may be told to download the lesson. They'll teach the class. The instructor will sit in the front row. Because how we choose now that captain, how we promote that captain, what we expect of that captain who is now so empowered in a hyper-connected world is fundamentally changing. They not only need to do critical thinking and reasoning, they need to be able to reinvent, re-engineer their job while they're doing it. So that's basically what's going on out there. And that really brings us back here to North Chicago and Lake Forest, because it means that we actually have 2 educational challenges today. We need to bring our bottom to our average so much faster. We need to bring our bottom to our average so much faster. And at the same time, we need to bring our average to the global heights so much higher. The first is a challenge of the 3 R's. We need rigor, more reading, writing, and arithmetic for all our young people who are below average. And at the same time, the other requires the 3 C's, creativity, collaboration, and communication, the very sources of the kind of inspirational thinking that enables and empowers people to find their extra. That's the dual educational challenge we face today, and we can talk about that in the Q&A, and we all know how difficult that is. Let me close, and we can get to questions by just trying to preempt a question. It's one that we get and we address in the book a lot. We address in the book significantly, we get the question a lot, and that is, what do you tell your kids today? What do you tell your kids about this hyper-connected world? So I have two girls, both are out of college now, but all I can share with you is what I tell my own girls. And I basically have 4 pieces of advice of how to lean into this world. First is think like an immigrant. Second is think like an artisan. Third is think like a starter-upper. And fourth is think like a waitress at Perkins Pancake House in Minneapolis, just off Highway 100 and France Avenue, my favorite restaurant. First of all, think like an immigrant. How does the new immigrant think? The new immigrant thinks, you know what? I just showed up here in North Chicago, and there's no legacy spot waiting for me with Michael at Rosalind Franklin Medical School. I better figure out what's going on here, and I better pursue the opportunities with more vigor and consistency and stick-to-itiveness than anybody else. Immigrants are paranoid optimists. They are optimists because they picked up from somewhere and came to somewhere else they thought would be better. And they are paranoid because they know it can always be taken away from them if they don't show something extra. Friends, we are all new immigrants to the hyper-connected world. Think like an immigrant. Stay hungry. Second, think like an artisan. This is an idea from Larry Katz at Harvard. Who was the artisan? The artisan was that person in the Middle Ages before mass manufacturing, factories. The artisan made every item individually, every item one off. They made every pair of shoes individually, every saddle individually, every utensil, every piece of clothing, every piece of furniture. They made each one individually. And what did the best artisans do? They took such pride in their work, they carved their initials into it. Do your job every day as if you'd want to carve your initials into it at the end of the day. Think like an artisan, bring something extra, and take pride. Third, think like a starter-upper. This is an idea from Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. You know, Reid always likes to say in Silicon Valley, there's only one F word, and it isn't even 4 letters. It's finished. If you ever think you're finished in Silicon Valley, you're finished. The key to be a successful starter-upper is to always be in beta. Always see yourself as in beta. Always see yourself as 4/5 done with that piece of software and throwing it over the wall to see how the audience and the market reacts, and then taking it back and fixing it and repairing it and improving it and throwing it over the wall again. Always be in beta. Always be reinventing, re-engineering, and redesigning yourself in response to the market there. Never think of yourself as finished. It is truly a 4-letter word. And lastly, think like that waitress at Perkins Pancake House in Minneapolis, my favorite restaurant. I was home working on the book, Sunday morning at 7 a.m., having breakfast with my best friend Ken Greer at Perkins Pancake House. I ordered 3 buttermilk pancakes and scrambled eggs. Ken ordered 3 buttermilk pancakes and fruit. And after 15 minutes, the waitress came, she put down her 2 plates, and all she said to Ken was, "I gave you extra fruit." She got a 50% tip. Why? Because that waitress didn't control much, but she controlled the fruit ladle. And that was her extra. What was she doing, that waitress? She was thinking entrepreneurially. In her own little world, she was acting entrepreneurially. Always think entrepreneurially. So promise me you'll think like an immigrant, stay hungry, think like an artisan, take pride, think like a starter-upper and always be in beta, and think like that waitress and always be entrepreneurial, because, friends, we all do now truly live in Garrison Keillor's Lake Wobegon, where all the men are strong, all the women are beautiful, and all the children need to be above average. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's so great to see everybody. My name's Robin Staines from Advance, Illinois. It's delightful to see you here. We're going to move right into questions. I will start by saying that as excited as I am to share a stage with Tom Friedman, which I will mention on a regular basis going forward.
Thank you.
I've always considered myself an optimist, and I have to say you've now made me a paranoid optimist. So there are, hopefully you've got cards. I see some of you waving them. We do have people moving through, and I'll try to get to as many, but while we're waiting for those to come up, I'm just going to get us kicked off just a very little bit.
Great.
So you talk about, both in your book and this evening, about the need to be constantly adapting and re-engineering and entrepreneurial starter-upper, and you're directing this at the education system. And there are many people in the room who are involved, and it is notoriously almost a caricature of a slow-moving, non-adaptive, go into a classroom any decade you want to pick, it looks an awful lot like it did the decade before. What's it going to take to shake that up? Because it strikes me if that system doesn't show more of that same spark, we're going to have trouble turning out students who do.
Well, I think that the change really is happening, and it's coming from two directions. One are revolutionary people, and the other revolutionary technologies. So the revolutionary people have been like Michelle Rhee in Washington, D.C., who just kind of blew up the system with the support of the mayor, and basically brought us a teacher evaluation system, which has really, I think, been a model that has been followed to some degree or another in other parts of the country. It's also going to happen via revolutionary technology. We were just talking beforehand what the iPad will do. In a couple of years, there really will be no books in school. Kids will do all their work on an iPad, and think about that, you'll get instant evaluation. You'll know exactly which kids can't figure out complements, which ones can't multiply, which ones can't divide, and you'll be able to push lessons to them. So I think the combination of the two and the pressure on the world is going to blow up the whole system, basically, or hopefully lead to a real evolution, not an explosion. But I think the pressure is going to be too great. We're going to see our higher education with programs like Coursera, the one I mentioned from Stanford. MIT and Harvard are doing the same thing. And think what that's going to mean. So let's just talk about the higher education, then we'll talk about K through 12. So Stanford, this started with three computer science professors, each of whom had 100,000 students in their class online. And 13,000 of them from all over the world actually completed all the homework and the exams and were given not a diploma, but simply a document from Stanford University that said they completed this course. Now they got 40 courses in the curriculum now. It's to say Stanford, Michigan, Princeton, and I believe, and University of Pennsylvania, Berkeley may be part of it too. So now you're an employer. You're an employer here in Lake Forest. And you're looking for, you got a biogen company, you're a spin-off from Michael's fine school here. You got a biogen company. And now you just come to Coursera and you say, could you give me a list of the 100 top performing students who finish your courses in software programming and genomics? Think how powerful that is for an employer. I can now find the people with the exact talents that I need, that I know, proven, thrived in this course. It's going to change everything. And by the way, if you notice, Harvard and MIT announced they've got a parallel one. They've just started. So I think this is going to blow up higher education. Because when you can get one of these course certificates for $50, tuition at Stanford is $40,000. The market's just going to drive this. So technology is going to do it. But I'm not as much of a techno-determinist as I'm accused of being. And as much as I believe in Michelle Rhee's reforms in the DC school system, which needed real shaking up, being married to a teacher and being the father of a TFA, Teach for America core member in Washington, D.C., and now a teacher in the D.C. school system, I know something about the challenges and problems of K-12 education. And let me say, I happen to have a lot of sympathy for teachers. So there are big issues with the unions, and we need to address those in a collaborative way. Because you only have to be married to a teacher to know that the biggest education philanthropists in this country are K-12 school teachers. The money that the average teacher spends from her own pocket to buy material, equipment, birthday cupcakes for kids in their class, as the husband and father of teachers, I can tell you, if you totaled it all up, teachers in this country are the biggest educational philanthropists we have. Let's never forget that. So with that said, now with that said, so I just want to establish kind of where I'm at, because I sometimes bristle a little bit when I hear everyone saying we have a teacher problem. We do have a teacher problem, but we have other problems as well, so let's talk about them, and this is how we approach it in the book. We do need to do, if we want to have high-performing schools, we do need to parallel what every other school system with high-performing K-12 schools have. We have to recruit our teachers from the top third, or in the case of some countries, top 10% of their graduating classes. You can't have people teaching math or physics who don't understand math or physics. It's just that simple. And I don't know how we do that. I mean, there are a lot of ideas. But we certainly have to make this profession more attractive to recruit and attract, I think, the most talented top third of our class. That's certainly number one. Number two, we do need a teacher evaluation system. One that doesn't just say, I've been here 3 years, therefore I have life tenure, or 4 years, or whatever it is. None of us in the real world have that, and we can't have that in education either. We all have to be, I think, on some kind of performance track. And the best way to get there, I think, are through some of the collaborative methods and models that are popping up all over the country. In the book we profile the one in Colorado, where get a system of teacher evaluation that the teachers can buy into. I think that is very important, but we do have to get there. And that will take a little bit of shove sometime, from parents and others. But again, think about this. Teacher evaluation system in Washington, D.C. is that for 30 minutes, 5 times a year, your principal, vice principal, or a master educator sits in your classroom, observes you for 30 minutes, and that the totality of those 5 observations largely determines whether you will be determined highly effective as a teacher and what your rewards and promotion will be. Which one of us here, please raise your hand, would like to have their job performance determined, their pay and promotion, by someone sitting in your office for 30 minutes, total stranger, observing your performance 5 times a year? So the system's in the right direction, because there's got to be some kind of evaluation, but we need to do it in multiple ways that really give teachers a chance not only to show their best performance, but to learn from these sessions as well, and not treat them purely as punitive. So we definitely need better teachers, and we want to recruit them and learn to evaluate them and help them improve along the way as best we can. But you know what else we need? Because this is a collective problem. This is a collective action problem. We can't just outsource K-12 education to our teachers the way we outsourced the Iraq War to 0.5% of the public, and then we all just sort of go along and kind of just sit back and wait for them to parent our kids. We need better parents. We need parents who take an interest in their kids' education and ask them every day, how did you do in school? Did you do your homework? The people who do the PISA test, the comparison of 15-year-olds around the world, 60 different countries, Andreas Schleicher, the guy who runs it for the OECD, OECD is a good friend of mine, he actually did a study, I wrote it up as a column, where they actually interviewed 5,000 parents in the PISA pool, and they found that parents who did as little as ask their kid What did you do in school today? What did you learn in school today? Those kids perform better on the PISA tests than parents who didn't. There's simply no substitute for parents who take an interest in their child's education. Third, we need better neighbors. You all are neighbors here. We need neighbors who care about the quality of the public school in their neighborhood, whether they have kids in them or not. Because the studies on this are absolutely crystal clear, okay? You're either going to be building better public schools or more prisons, okay? There is a direct correlation between performance and dropout rates and how many kids will end up in prison. So whether you got kids in that school or not, you better be a good neighbor and be willing to invest in those public schools. We need better business leaders who also want to invest in their public schools, not just say, can't get the jobs here, let's outsource them to India or to Costa Rica. Fourth, we need better political leaders who know what world they're living in, who know that 9% of applications to Grinnell College this year came from China and 43% had perfect 800s on their math SATs, and therefore are constantly demanding rising educational standards in their schools, not dumbing them down. Lastly, we need better students. We need students who know what world they're in. And I got to tell you, sometimes I go to the mall on Saturday, I look around, and I just shake my head and I just say, you are going to be roadkill, okay? We need students who come to school ready to learn, not to text. We talk in the book about a young girl who sent 40,000 and received 40,000 text messages a month. I'm a columnist for the New York Times. I'd have that much to say. I don't know what you say. And 40,000 text messages a month, but if you're wondering why she's getting B's and C's, that's probably it. You know, one of the worst movies ever made came out last year. We say it in the book. It's called Race to Nowhere. It was about how our kids are too stressed out. You know, Johnny needs time for Facebook, Susie needs time for soccer and the play, and Billy needs a little time for wrestling and whatnot. That's not stress, folks. Stress will be not understanding the thick Chinese accent of your first boss. That will be stress, okay? Missing out on Facebook time will not be stress, okay? So, you know, as I always tell people, I didn't start this world. People think I did. I really didn't. I just documented it. I just went around and tried to figure out what was going on. But all I know is this: you give me better parents, better neighbors, better political leaders, better students, and I'll make every good teacher better, and I'll make every better teacher great. It's a collective action problem.
So let's pick apart those, you know, piece by piece. I've got a series of questions that are interested. I think people buy into the need for greater creativity and critical thinking, and some people also throw in character. That's obviously an underline.
Sure.
Two interlocking questions there. One, we used to lead the world in creativity and starter-upness. So where did we get off the rails on that? And then how do we get that back in? Is that really a role for schools? And how can schools really be the leader in, you know, creative thinking, entrepreneurial, and or some of the other things you
Sure.
were talking about, the need for neighbors, families, et cetera?
Well, not only did we used to lead the world in creativity, we still do. That's the good news. There are 5 companies out there that are just killing it today. They're called Amazon, Google, Twitter, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. So we still, you know, lead the world in that. We still are producing the best companies, you know.
She's paranoid too.
I'm really glad, thank you. The problem is we just need more. We need more at every level. You see, when people, I think when I say extra, you know, we all aren't going to be Steve Jobs. I'm sure I couldn't be, you know, and we should never expect everyone to be. But everyone can, I think, be above average at something. You know, my mother was had Alzheimer's and was in a nursing home for 10 years. How much would I have paid extra for the nurse who didn't just feed my mom and take care of her, but put a smile on her face every day, who brought something extra? Whenever I saw that, I pulled the nursing home director aside and said, how can I get, you know, this person to deal with what will it take? How much more can I pay for that? What would you pay to go into the local wine shop here and have the person who waits on you, not just sort of there scratching their belly, what do you need, you know, but say, boy, you're looking for wine? Well, I'm actually I've made myself an expert on Californias, New Zealand, French. What would you like in Cabernets? So, extra doesn't just mean you learn how to program an iPod. Extra can be being a great massage therapist. It can be being a great nurse. It can be being a great doctor that actually communicates and likes patients. It can mean a whole lot of things that people will pay extra for, okay? We all don't have to be writing software. So that's I think, a big part of what we have to understand. Why is it, though, we need more people like that? It's because where do jobs come from? We kind of lost sight of that in this discussion. To have more employees, you need more employers, okay? So we need everybody starting something. And I don't care what it is, whether it's a cupcake company. We suddenly have who thought? You thought everything had been invented until suddenly there's 3 chains of cupcakes around Washington, D.C. I mean, the oldest thing in the world, a cupcake, turns out to be a business, okay? So, see, what is my vision of America? If I could help Obama with one thing. Yeah, we're not supposed to talk who we voted for, so don't tell anybody this, okay? But we're having a campaign now, unless I missed it, nobody's got any vision for America. No one's saying, here's the world we're living in, and here's how I see America fitting into this world, and here's the policies I want to put in place so America can lead that world. Have I missed that discussion? Did I miss that debate? Because I don't hear it, okay? I don't hear it from Obama, and I don't hear it from Romney. And to me, it's as obvious as the nose on my face. We want America to be, for the 21st century, what Cape Canaveral was to America of the 20th century. What do I mean? Cape Canaveral, that's the place we launched our one national moonshot. And it drove all kinds of jobs and industry and innovation. We're not going to have another national moonshot. What I want is America to be the place where everyone in the world wants to come to launch their moonshot, to start something. And I want them to come here because we have the best infrastructure, the best education, the best rule of law, the best IP protection, the best immigration policies, the most government-funded research. Because if everyone comes here to start something, there'll be plenty of work for the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker.
Well, let me ask you a question on the, when you talk about, and I really like the idea that, the bottom has to catch up. I think that's an idea that's out there that people understand. The idea that the average has to move higher, I don't think has made it out. And so a two-part question. One, what's it going to take for that notion to really penetrate? How do you respond to people who, and there's sort of a steady drumbeat of people who say, college isn't necessary, and it's a waste. Not everybody needs to go to college. Some amount of it is undoubtedly true. And then, if you believe that that is somewhat misbegotten, and some amount of additional education is going to be necessary, how do you deal with the fact that we've got skyrocketing costs, far beyond other OECD countries?
So you've asked a bunch of questions in there. Let me just try to disentangle.
Well, I'm trying to keep up with the answers.
Yeah. So. First of all, I am certainly college, 4-year liberal arts college is not for everybody, and there's nothing wrong with either community college or vocational college where different people can find their extra, whatever works for them. I'm all for that. That said, I'm a huge believer in the liberal arts. Why is that? Where does creativity come from? Where does creativity come from? It actually comes from having 2 different specialties, 2 or 3 or 4, and mashing one up with the other. What is the iPod? The iPod is actually an MP3 player mashed up with the vision of an online music store, mashed around a whole new brand. Steve Jobs was the king of actually mashing up. Now, he also tells the story. I mean, he gave this great, and we quote it in the book, graduation speech at Stanford, in which he explains he went to Reed College in Oregon, dropped out after 1 semester. But during the semester he dropped out, he dropped in on Reed College's calligraphy classes. Those calligraphy classes all went into the Mac keyboard, okay? You never know where inspiration is going to come from. My favorite columns, for me, the ones I enjoy doing the most, the ones that really get me excited, is when I kind of take my globalization framework and apply it to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Or when I take my environmental framework and apply it to the Arab Spring. I come up with something no one else is going to come up with. I'm mashing it all together. Well, Leonardo da Vinci, he was a painter, a mathematician, a scientist, a writer, and each one nourished the other. So there's a huge amount of innovation going on around how to teach creativity. Tony Wagner at Harvard just has a new book out, but there's tons of it. And it's all about getting people out of silo thinking and getting them to think horizontally and mash things together. That's the crude version of it. We give a lot of examples in the book, though, of people using these kind of new educational innovations to teach creativity.
How worried should we be that the cost of post-secondary education, whatever sort, be it technical, community college or four-year,
Sure.
really has gone up?
It really has gone up faster than healthcare. And here my answer is you have to understand the first rule of the hyper-connected world. It's everything and its opposite. So on the one hand, higher education goes up and makes higher education available to fewer and fewer people. And at the same time, the same system produces a Coursera breakthrough or the iPad that suddenly gives you a cheap solution for anyone to do online learning. So the system works both ways. The only consistent part is you have to work harder as an individual.
That actually leads in, there's a bucket of questions in here about competition that, what you're really speaking to, that's a great example of how competition, that much money, that's a competitive opportunity. How do you think that applies to education? Clearly there's ongoing discussions in the education field about vouchers, about charter schools, and then even at the micro level about incentive pay, and merit pay at the teacher level. What are your thoughts on the role that
from my
plays?
little, and I'm here on shaky ground, but my little experience in Washington, D.C., which has a lot of charters, there's a lot of wonderful education innovation happening in Washington, D.C. The statistics, though, our data is still out, though, whether charters are producing differentiated returns. But I think I'm all for experimentation. That's why I'm a big fan of charters. I'm all for school choice within the public school system, okay? Where people can leave a low-performing school, and you can do this in DC if there's space, and move to a higher-performing school. I think that sends an important market signal that is very valuable to the system.
So I love, and I'm sure I'm going to use ruthlessly, the OODA loop. And you set up that very challenging problem. You didn't quite explain how we're going to navigate our way through that. So two questions that came up here. One, how does the OODA loop problem we're in now compare to other great crises that we faced as a country? That's to get rid of a little of the paranoia and back to the optimism. And two, what is it really going to take to shake that up?
Well, the older I get, the more I believe that leadership really matters. And ultimately, this is the whole second half of the book, which I couldn't get into, which is our political system is broken now, and we're not getting the kind of leadership and discussion that I think we need. One need again only look at the poverty of this campaign to appreciate that. But I never tell anyone where to send their kids to school. That's a really hard choice, and I respect any decision anyone makes. But I sure wish the Obamas had sent their kids to public school in Washington, D.C. Imagine the impact on the public school system in Washington, D.C. of the president and his wife going to parent-teacher conferences once every quarter. So you can't just talk the talk. You got to walk the walk. And so leadership really does matter. And until and unless we invest in these, in all these problems with real leadership, looking people in the eye, telling them the truth, where we are right now, hard to really get out of the hole we're in. And I only hope that, as anyone reading my column knows, I've been advocating a third party. I've been advocating a third party because I think our system needs a shock. And unfortunately, no one would step forward. And so I think that's too bad, because I think we're going to have a less elevated campaign because of that. I fear we're going to have two guys with $1 billion in advertising nuclear weapons basically destroy each other over the next 6 months or 5 months, and then we'll all have to come together to deal with the fiscal cliff. Have a nice day, is sort of what we have to look forward to. So the system's really broken, and I think only an external shock will change it, and that shock will come. It'll either come from the middle in the form of a third party, it'll come from the market, or it'll come from Mother Nature. But one of those things will give the system a shock.
And in terms of the stakes, compared to other sort of very challenging periods that we've been through in the nation's history, back to the optimism, we're looking for where does this rank in terms of sort of...
Well, the thing that, people ask me, you say at the beginning of your talk that you're an optimist, but a frustrated optimist. We get the frustration, Mr. Friedman, but where from comes the optimism? The answer is very simple. Drugs. I use a lot of drugs, okay? No, it's only a joke. Don't tweet that,
there
anybody.
There is at least one journalist here, so I want you to be concerned about that quote.
Just a joke. No, the truth is that my optimism comes from being a reporter and traveling all over this amazing country. And this is the penultimate, third to last chapter of the book, excuse me, not the penultimate. This country, thank God, is still full of people who just didn't get the word. They didn't get the word that Germany's going to eat our breakfast. They didn't get the word that China's going to eat our lunch. So they just go out and invent stuff and start stuff and collaborate with stuff. The country, you want to be an optimist about America? Stand on your head. The country looks so much better from the bottom up than the top down. Who knew this medical school was here? And they're expanding. In fact, I opened my book tour at in just outside of New Haven. I can't think of the name now it was a small college out there, but I sat down with the president of the school right before, I'll think of it in a second, and I said, what's new here? He said, we just opened a medical college. I said, you just opened a medical college? Didn't you get the word? We're in a recession, a subprime crisis. This country is full of people, thank God, who didn't get the word. My favorite quote in the book is from a Marine colonel. We interviewed him and said, why did you guys surge in Iraq? He said, very simple, Tom, we were too dumb to quit. The country is full of people, thank God, who are too dumb to quit. And they just go out and start stuff and fix stuff and invent stuff. I see it everywhere. The country is still exploding with innovation. The problem is we're not enabling, nurturing, and making it so much easier for more people to do. We could be doing so much better. All we have to do, really just two things. Get a $200 billion stimulus to get some job growth going, focused on productive infrastructure. Give me Simpson Bowles, and ladies and gentlemen, this country will take off. We will be the envy of the world. That's what's so frustrating. If we just got those two macro things right, we would be on our way. We still have to deal with all these education and whatnot problems, but just get the big stuff right. And right now, our two parties can't do that.
And the biggest barrier to that is what? Why
the biggest barrier to that, well, we have a chapter in the book called Whatever You're For, I'm Against. And it's a line from a Groucho Marx movie, and our political system right now is broken. It's broken for a lot of reasons. It has to do with the gerrymandering of political districts down to the atomic level, okay, thanks to Google Maps. So we get a Congress of people who come from only Republican or only Democratic districts, doesn't make for great collaboration. Money in politics is out of all control thanks to our Supreme Court and the Citizens United decision. And so basically our Congress today is a forum for legalized bribery, okay? That is exactly what it is. And it's very hard to get the attention of a congressman or woman when all they are doing half the time is dialing for dollars, okay? And, on top of that, we have a media. I mean, look what's going on, poor CNN. Have you watched what's going on with CNN? They're getting crushed by Fox and by MSNBC. Because CNN's out there kind of middle of the road trying to report the news, and basically that's not where the money is. The money's in carnival barkers, basically, and people holding extreme positions that we watch as entertainment. So some of us watch ESPN, and other of us watch PSPN, which is the Politics Sport Network, okay? And we treat politics as sports. One of my favorite quotes in the book is from Mike Murphy, political consultant for John McCain in the previous election, later retired, he gave up on McCain, and Mike's a really smart guy. And he talked about, oh, I didn't mean that, actually, I didn't really mean that, but I really didn't mean that. Wasn't making that connection, but he's a smart guy. And, but he tells when he first got into politics, he had a advertising guy who was kind of his really guru, and they were talking one day about negative advertising and why it works, you know. And they were talking about advertising in general, and they got in this conversation where, you know, Mike or the other guy, I don't remember, he tells the story in the book, said, you know, why didn't Burger King ever attack McDonald's? Why didn't Burger King run ads that said, McDonald's hamburgers have maggots in them? Okay. And this guy said to Mike, he said, I always remembered this. First rule of advertising, Mike, never kill the category. Never kill the category. We have killed the category of politics in this country just when we need it most. But don't worry. Thank God there are still plenty of people out there who didn't get the word. I hope you're among them. Thank you very much.